You're listening to HowStreet.com radio, available online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. Welcome to HowStreet.com radio, the online source for market opinions. Here is Jim Goddard.
My guest is Hilliard MacBeth, CEO of the MacBeth Group in Edmonton. Welcome to the show, Hilliard.
Great to be on the show.
What's happening on the Alberta employment front?
Well, yesterday the report came out that indicated that new claims for unemployment insurance, or employment insurance, I guess it's called now, jumped 25%. But when I looked at the numbers, I noticed that even with that huge increase, the number of people on EI in Alberta is still quite low. So I think it just eyeballing the numbers, it looked like we're up to 5 or 7%. But we have 11% of the population in Canada and something like 15% of the GDP. So, but I suspect it will go a lot higher before it stops rising.
Yeah, I saw a number that estimated 185,000 people could lose their jobs.
Yeah, now that would be a big chunk, but a lot of those would be in. So the three areas in Canada where the EI claims jumped were, of course, Alberta, and then also Saskatchewan and Newfoundland, Labrador. So those are directly the only three places where there's significant oil and gas activity. So it certainly seems tied to it. And certainly in the one of the biggest things is in the front-end engineering and design sector. The engineers and people that work on the projects that are coming up, there's really, anecdotally, I hear there's really very little work for them. There's no big projects planned. There's a number of projects that they're working on that they're going to finish. They'll follow through, but really nothing on the drawing board. And the problem with those kind of jobs is those are very well paid, highly technical jobs. So, and those people don't have a lot of alternative places to go within Canada. So they have to go wherever in the world where they can find work of that type. And it doesn't look like it's going to be Alberta for a while.
Is there anywhere in the world where they're looking for oil and developing new projects?
I don't know that. That's a good question. I know Australia. So Canada and Australia are interesting because they are the two countries that have benefited the most from the massive developments in China and also in resources, although Australia is a bit different from Canada in the mix. They've got more iron ore and coal and things like that. But I would think there's some very massive projects in Australia. There's one liquefied natural gas and one iron ore project that I'm aware of. But I don't think there's going to be very many new ones. And so the kind of people that do the work a year or two ahead of actual construction, it's going to be very difficult for them. And they're a leading indicator as well in the economic cycle. And I was checking on the Edmonton and Calgary, and the incomes in Edmonton and Calgary are much higher than the rest of Canada. Around 100,000 per household, rivaling Silicon Valley in San Jose, California, for really the only places that have those kind of incomes. But I suspect it's very much dependent on continued activity in the energy sector.
What about the Ritchie Brothers auction of oil equipment back on April 28th? How did that turn out?
Well, I was shocked to find out, because I was driving by that. I think I maybe the last time I talked to you, I mentioned that it's just an amazing sight to see all the equipment. And the reports that came out, although you can't be 100% sure if you're getting the full story, indicated that it was mostly Alberta buyers that bought the equipment, and they quoted several of them saying it's a great time to buy. The prices have come down, and I don't need the equipment today because I don't have any projects ready to go right now. But I'm going to grab it now because I know that the cycle will turn soon, and then I'll be ready to jump in and win a bunch of contracts. Which it's a speculative kind of activity to use cash to do that when you don't have a use for that equipment. I was shocked that people were willing to do that. So it seems like in Alberta, even though you and I are talking as if this downturn is going to be pretty serious and there's more to come, and some of those reports, like you mentioned, the 185,000 people, would indicate that that's the case. The local people are still pretty optimistic, and they expect that it's going to be a short-lived slowdown, and then it's going to rebound, and the price of oil will come back, and it'll all be fine. Unfortunately, I don't agree with that. I think we're in for a tougher time, and I would compare it more to like the 80s, and people today have to be fairly old to remember the 80s. So I'm in that category, and it was bad. I mean, there were several large real estate companies that went under. There's two banks and one large financial institution that completely disappeared, and a whole bunch of people walked away from their houses, because, as you know, in Alberta you can walk away from your house. In BC you can't, but in Alberta you can, and they won't chase you for the deficit. So yeah, depending on the category, but we'll find out, what happens. But I suspect that a lot of the people in Alberta that got jobs in the last 5 years, last to be hired, first to be laid off, right? So, but those are also the people that have the highest debt loads, and certainly the numbers show that Alberta has grabbed a much larger portion of the mortgage debt in Canada in the last few years than the population would indicate. So it's more than double.
So the banks, if people walk away there, they're going to take a huge hit.
Well, the banks, I have talked to several lawyers about this, and they indicated to me that the banks have taken measures to protect themselves. So what happened was, in the Depression, so many people were being foreclosed on, losing their farms and their homes, that the politicians passed a law saying that it was not allowed to do that. But it would be easy for the banks to change the documentation. And also, anybody who's using CMHC insurance that doesn't have the 20% down payment, that rule doesn't apply. So you can't walk away from a CMHC insured mortgage. You can't walk away from an investment property. Has to be an owner-occupied property with more than 20% down payment. So it's probably not going to be that large a number of people that are going to walk away in those categories. It's more likely that the people that walk away are also be the people that can't take advantage of that provision, because they've done investment purchases, or they've used CMHC insurance to get their loan. CMHC puts out, last year they put out 23% of all their money under the insurance program in Alberta, and Alberta only has 11% of the Canadian population. So it's going to be big. It's going to be very big.
What have you seen in Calgary and Edmonton real estate so far? So
what's happening is interesting. There's a lot of houses for sale, but the prices haven't dropped, and there's still some people buying, but the number of sales, especially in Calgary, have dwindled to a mere trickle. And listings, there's a tremendous, especially in the higher end homes, over 800, 900,000. There's a huge number of offerings. But of course, anybody that can afford a home in that category is probably either worried about their job or just worried in general about the situation. So that, somebody wants to buy $1.5 million home, they probably already own a home. It'd be very, very unusual for them to just be coming in with cash from dropping in from Mars or something. So they'd have to think about whether they can sell their existing home to buy that other home, and so the activity is dried up. But prices, if you look at the numbers, they come out every month. Under CREA, they show a small drop, but it's a fraction. It's like 1% or 2%. But I don't think it's indicative of what's really happening on the ground. I think if somebody really wants to sell, especially a property in the higher end category, they would have to drop their price quite a bit. They'd have to be a very motivated seller.
We'll have more with Hilliard MacBeth right after this.
More and more people are looking to the internet for intelligent, riveting, and thought-provoking interviews. To advertise on the Goddard Report and TalkDigitalNetwork.com, call 604-699-8600, 604-699-8600.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Hilliard MacBeth from the MacBeth Group in Edmonton. Hilliard, anything happening politically under the new NDP government in Alberta?
Well, the latest thing that came out, I think, yesterday was the announcement that there's only going to be 12 cabinet ministers. So I was talking to a group of senior business people yesterday, and they said, well, that's because they can only find 12 people that know anything about business or government. But that maybe is a little unfair. But it is quite a dramatic change, because they used to have over 20 cabinet ministers in Alberta. So, but so far we haven't seen who they are. It's going to be on Sunday that it happens. But there is a lot of talk about, what are they going to do on the energy file in terms of a royalty review. The only concrete announcement is been so far. Of course, they haven't taken over yet, but they will soon. Is they want to raise the minimum wage to $15. And I was shocked to read this morning that there's over 350,000 people in Alberta that make the minimum wage or lower. So I would have thought that I would have guessed that because wages are quite a bit higher in Alberta than they are in BC or Ontario, that there wouldn't be very many people that would be affected by that minimum wage of $15. But apparently there are. There's a lot of temporary foreign workers in Alberta, and maybe they were paying them less than 15. So
well, legally, yes, legally they're allowed to pay them less than the minimum wage.
Oh, because they're temporary foreign workers?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So that's really the main concrete announcement so far, is the minimum wage. But they're going to have a lot of pressure on them. I was talking to one observer who is very knowledgeable about these things, and he said there's going to be a tremendous amount of pressure from the people that got elected. There's 53 or 54 of them, and they would have certain expectations about the change in government, and additional money for schools, and change to how they treat the government employees and the unions and that sort of thing. So there's going to be quite a bit happening in Alberta, but really none of that is going to really affect what's going to happen with the economy. What's going to happen with the economy was already written with the decline in the oil price, and as you and I were saying a minute ago, the very large number of people are being laid off in the energy patch. And unfortunately, the very large number of people in Alberta that are young, highly paid, with very large debts. None of the policies from the NDP are really going to make any difference to that. That's all going to be a very difficult adjustment.
What's the future of coal in Alberta?
Well, coal provides it's used for making electricity primarily. I think there's a little bit of coal that gets exported as metallurgical coal, but I don't think there's very much anymore. I think the BC has more metallurgical coal, and it gets exported to Japan and China, and even that's struggling, I think. So really, all the coal is used for in Alberta now is to make electricity. So they've got several large plants, and that produces 53% of the electricity in Alberta. And the new NDP government has said that, they haven't officially stated this, but in their policy platform, it said that they would phase out coal-fired electricity. It's one of the biggest greenhouse gas emitters in Canada, along with the oil sands. So unfortunately for Alberta, Alberta has the two biggest emitters of greenhouse gases, the oil sands and coal. So I think if they were going to phase out one, it would have to be the coal. I don't think they'd be phasing out the oil sands anytime soon. And but then the question becomes, well, how do you replace that? We don't have hydroelectric power in Alberta, so it would have to be natural gas fired. And natural gas is considered quite a bit cleaner than coal, so I suspect that's the way it's going to go.
Is it time to buy energy stocks?
I was getting ready to think that way a few months ago, and we're totally out of energy stocks in our portfolio. Of the conventional side, we've got one or two in the alternative energy sector, but in the basic oil and gas production, exploration, I had exited that quite a while ago. I've been out of it for a couple of years at least, and mostly out of it, and now entirely out of it. But I was thinking, I was kind of patting myself on the back and thinking, oh, this is great, we'll be able to buy back in. But the strangest things happened. First of all, the share prices didn't go down enough to reflect the change in the prices for oil and gas. And then secondly, starting in January, they started to rebound, and now they're back to prices that just don't make any sense unless the oil price rebounds back up to $70, $80, $90 by the end of the year, and then of course they would make sense. But if you don't believe that, then the prices just aren't cheap enough yet, and unfortunately that's the case. The problem with the whole scenario is there's a huge amount of new oil of production in the U.S. It's 10 years ago they were producing 5 million barrels a day, and today they're producing 9.4 million barrels a day. So you'd have to believe that they were going to shut down a whole bunch of their production to think that it was a great time to invest in oil and gas stocks right now. And I don't think they are. I think the way the shale oil works, it only takes 28 days to drill a well, and you get a lot of money back in the first year because of the initial surge, very large production surge in as soon as you do the fracking. And so as soon as the oil price picks up a little bit to where they feel like it makes sense, they can restart some of those wells that they maybe have stopped drilling and drill new wells. So it's going to be a tough time. And Saudi Arabia just announced that they're going to let the market decide what happens with oil, and they've increased their production another 1 million barrels. So you got 4 new million barrels in the U.S. and another 1 million from Saudis. That's a huge amount of new supply into the market.
I'm wondering why is Shell so intent on sending that giant deep sea rig in Seattle to the Arctic in Alaska to drill for oil at a time when the world appears to be awash in crude right now? Why would they be doing that?
It's amazing, really, isn't it? I would only be guessing, but my guess is that in a big corporation like that, it's like a big bureaucracy, and there's people at the top, and then there's vice presidents, and then there's divisions of people that work on projects over the long term. And I'm guessing that there's a division in Shell that is very interested in what they call frontier exploration, and they've been working on this project for a number of years, and there's a window with the government approval for whatever reason, and they've been given the go-ahead. And it's either that or tell those people they have to wait a bunch more years, in which case Shell's going to lose them. They're going to move on to something else. So I'm guessing that in the capital allocation process, it was their turn to get the approval for that project. But it seems like a very high risk thing to do, and only a very, very big company would do that. I wonder if the future of oil and gas generally in the energy business is with much smaller companies that are much more agile, like these companies that do fracking with the shale. They can turn it on and off they can turn on a dime. They don't have to plan 5 years and 10 years out like this Shell project you're talking about. They can shut her down, and then if the price picks up in a month or two, they can start her up again. It's a completely different world. And that also is true in the alternative energies. There's a lot of small companies working on wind, solar, natural gas, cogeneration, all that stuff. And the numbers are much smaller in terms of the initial investment up front.
Hilliard, fascinating to talk to you, and it's great to have a window on what's happening in Alberta.
Well, it's great to talk to you, and thank you very much for calling, and hope to talk to you again soon.
My guest has been Hilliard MacBeth, CEO of the MacBeth Group in Edmonton, author of the book When the Bubble Burst, Surviving the Canadian Real Estate Crash. His website, richardsongmp.com/web/macbeth.team. You're listening to HowStreet.com radio. Find us on Twitter at Talk Digital Net. Our YouTube channel is Talk Digital Network. Comments or questions for the show can be sent to info@HowStreet.com. I'm Jim Goddard.
Comments made on HowStreet.com radio are an expression of opinion only and should not be construed in any matter whatsoever as recommendations to buy or sell any financial instrument at any time. Available online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. HowStreet.com radio is a production of HowStreet Media Incorporated.